My name is Linda and I was a housekeeper. I held all the truth and it was time to spill it all out. Mr. Mark, I began softly. There's something I need to tell you. Something I haven't been able to ignore any longer. He raised his eyebrows slightly, sensing the weight in my voice. Go on. I steadied myself. I've been working here a long time. I've always respected your home, your privacy. But recently I've seen things that I think you deserve to know. He sat up straighter. I continued, Helen, she hasn't been faithful. I've seen her bring young men into the house when you were away. At first I wanted to believe it was business. But it's not. Mark was quiet. Not a blink. Not a breath. This isn't just a story. It is a story of love and betrayal. Stay tuned as I unveil the truth. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, do well to subscribe, like, and hit on notifications. To all my returning subscribers, thanks for stopping by. Let us begin. For over 6 years, I served as a housekeeper in one of the most talked about homes in Manhattan, a beautiful penthouse nestled high above the city's unending noise. From the outside, everything about the place glittered like the stars Helen so often worked with. But behind the spotless marble counters and designer curtains, I saw things most people wouldn't believe. Helen Summers was not just a star in the eyes of millions, she was the star. A Hollywood actress turned producer with sharp features, commanding grace, and a mind built for the spotlight. Her smile lit up red carpets, and her interviews were always trending. But when the cameras were off and the applause faded, she became someone else entirely. Her husband, Mark Preston, was the opposite of her. A calm, soft-spoken man with eyes that carried more silence than stories. He wasn't famous. He didn't seek attention. He was a financier, serious and humble. Sometimes, I wondered how they even ended up together. They had no children, just fame, fortune, and the constant presence of strangers. At first, I kept to my corner, minding the chores, cleaning rooms, and preparing tea just how Mark liked it. Over time, I became a fixture in their home. To Helen, I was invisible. To Mark, I was comfort. I had no need for drama or gossip. But when you work in a house like that, the truth doesn't knock. It whispers. And if you listen closely enough like I did, it reveals everything. At first, it was the unfamiliar scents. Cologne that didn't belong to Mark. Laughter from the hallway late at night when Helen said she was working. Then came the clothes. Jackets too trendy for someone Mark's age. Sneakers that seemed more at home in a gym than on a red carpet. I noticed patterns. Helen started hosting script meetings in the middle of the day, always when Mark was traveling. She would come downstairs glowing, her lipstick fresh, hair slightly tousled. And there would be water glasses in twos, plates that only I washed, and one extra spoon that always lay on the edge of the sink like a forgotten truth. I told myself it wasn't my business. People in that world lived differently. Maybe it was all innocent. But my heart knew. I knew. Still I stayed silent. Until the day I couldn't anymore. It began with footsteps, soft, uncertain, like someone trying not to be heard. Helen had told me to take the day off. Mark was away on business in London, and she claimed she needed space for a private virtual production meeting. But I had left my phone charger in the laundry room, so I quietly returned late in the afternoon, thinking I'd be in and out without a soul noticing. As I stepped into the apartment, the silence struck me. It wasn't the usual kind of silence. This one felt laced with secrets. I tiptoed toward the laundry room, my shoes quiet against the polished hardwood floor. That's when I heard laughter. A man's voice, youthful and confident. Helen laughed too, in that high, breathy tone she reserved for flattery. Curiosity pulled me forward. I wasn't trying to spy, but I also wasn't about to walk blindly into whatever was happening in the living room. From the hallway mirror I saw them. He looked no older than 25. Slim build, curly hair, dressed casually, but with that aspiring actor's edge, tight jeans, designer sneakers, and a gold chain that shimmered under the chandelier light. He leaned toward her, laughing like they'd known each other for ages. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture so familiar it made my stomach twist. There was no script in sight. No laptop. No call sheet. Just wine glasses. And Helen barefoot, her silk robe barely tied. I quietly backed away, my heart racing. I returned to the elevator, my charger forgotten. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. The whispers in my mind began to speak louder. How many times had this happened? How many others had come through those doors while Mark was away? The next morning, I came in at my usual time. Helen greeted me like nothing had happened. Her robe was gone, replaced with her usual workout set. She smiled, mentioned an audition she had to attend, and breezed out the door like a woman with nothing to hide. But I saw it in her eyes. She didn't know I had seen. She had no idea the quiet housekeeper she ignored had caught her in a moment that could ruin everything. Over the weeks that followed, I became more attentive. I wasn't snooping. I was simply paying attention. Young men started appearing more often. Some stayed briefly, others longer. She introduced them as interns or script assistants. But I never saw a script in their hands. What I did see were unzipped duffel bags, cologne bottles left in guest bathrooms, and traces of lipstick on wine glasses I never touched. Once, I passed by her room and heard muffled voices, followed by laughter and a door clicking shut behind me. I paused for just a moment. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked tired. Older, yes, but honest. I couldn't say the same for Helen. I wrestled with the truth for days. Mark wasn't just Helen's husband. He was kind to me. Always had been. Every Christmas, he made sure I had a bonus. On my birthday, he gave me cards with handwritten notes. He often asked if I was doing okay, if my son back in Florida needed anything. He was good, rare in a world filled with pretense. So I began to document. Quietly, carefully, not to hurt anyone, but to protect the man who didn't know his life was being played like a scene from a bad film. I took photos of the guest sign-ins, captured timestamps of when Helen would claim to be alone while entertaining her discoveries. One day, I even overheard her talking on the phone, boasting about giving a fresh face a shot in her next project. "He's raw talent," she said, "but he'll do anything for screen time." That phrase haunted me. Anything. It all came to a head one Thursday evening. I had stayed behind to finish laundry. Helen wasn't expecting me. I was in the back hallway folding towels when I heard the front door open and close, followed by giggles and the sound of shoes slipping off. I walked into the kitchen and stood still. Helen stood there with yet another young man, this one barely older than a college graduate. His shirt was already halfway unbuttoned, and Helen, confident as ever, walked past me like I was invisible. But this time I wasn't. She froze. "Oh, Linda," she said, her voice faltering. "I thought you had gone home." "No, ma'am," I replied, calm but firm. "I had one more load to finish." The young man looked confused, embarrassed. He muttered something about needing to use the restroom and disappeared down the hallway. Helen forced a laugh. "He's just a new actor." We were going over a script together. You know how hard it is to find genuine talent these days. I met her eyes for the first time. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sure it takes a lot of dedication." She stiffened. For a split second, I saw something crack in her perfect exterior. A hint of fear. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. She knew right then that I had seen too much. That moment was a turning point, not just for her, but for me. I had been behind closed doors long enough. And now, I was ready to open one. For Mark. For the truth. For myself. The weekend came quickly, and with it Mark's return. He walked into the penthouse with the same warm smile he always wore. Tired from travel, he placed his briefcase on the marble counter and asked if Helen was home. I told him she had gone out for a meeting. I didn't say more. Not yet. That evening, while preparing dinner, I stood quietly at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, while Mark scrolled through emails at the kitchen island. He looked up and smiled. Linda, you make this place feel like home. I don't think Helen realizes how lucky we are to have you. His words stung more than he knew. I hesitated, then turned off the burner. Mr. Mark, I began softly. There's something I need to tell you. Something I haven't been able to ignore any longer. He raised his eyebrows slightly, sensing the weight in my voice. Go on. I steadied myself. I've been working here a long time. I've always respected your home, your privacy. But recently I've seen things that I think you deserve to know. He sat up straighter. I continued, Helen, she hasn't been faithful. I've seen her bring young men into the house when you were away. At first I wanted to believe it was business. But it's not. Mark was quiet. Not a blink. Not a breath. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the envelope I had prepared. A simple white one with photos I'd printed and the log I'd written down in a small notebook. I placed it gently on the counter and stepped back. I didn't want to get involved, I said. But I couldn't stand by any longer. He stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. Then slowly he opened it. Minutes passed as he looked through each photo. Helen laughing with a different young man. Helen in a robe by candlelight, timestamps from entry logs. Evidence that couldn't be explained away. When he looked up at me, his eyes were not angry. They were broken. How long? He asked quietly. Months, I replied. Maybe longer. I only started paying attention recently, but there were signs long before that. He nodded slowly. His shoulders sank, the weight of betrayal settling in.
I'm sorry, he whispered.
He shook his head.
No.
Thank you. You didn't have to do this. That night, Mark didn't sleep in the master bedroom. He stayed in the guest room and barely spoke a word. Helen didn't return until after midnight. I heard them argue, her voice rising, his remaining firm and low. I know everything, Helen, he said. Linda told me, and she showed me proof. Helen's response was defensive, scattered. I heard her accuse me of jealousy, of planting lies. She's a housekeeper, Mark, she snapped. She wants your sympathy. She wants your money. His voice stayed steady. She wants honesty. Something I don't think you've given anyone in years. The next morning, Helen was gone. I found her bedroom half-packed. Designer clothes shoved into suitcases. Makeup scattered across the floor. She left behind a signed note, brief and unapologetic. It read, Mark, I hope one day you understand that fame comes with sacrifices. I never lied about who I was. I just never expected you to stop looking the other way. Helen. Mark filed for divorce quietly. No press. No tabloids. Just a legal team, a notary, and silence. Weeks passed. The house was calmer. Brighter even. Mark worked from home more often, and though we didn't talk about it much, there was a comfort in our quiet companionship. I cooked, cleaned, and listened when he wanted to speak. He would ask about my life, where I came from, what dreams I had put on hold. I told him about my son, about the years I'd worked in houses like his, always on the outside looking in. I never imagined someone like me would matter in a place like this, I said one afternoon. He looked at me then, not like a housekeeper, not like a woman beneath his status, but like someone who had seen him when it counted most. You've always mattered, Linda, he said gently. I just didn't know how much until now. It was the first time in years I felt seen. The air in the penthouse changed after Helen left. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt like peace. The scent of tension that had once lingered in every room had vanished. I no longer heard unfamiliar laughter echoing down the hall, or found wine glasses left behind like traces of secrets. What remained was something honest. Mark started waking up earlier. He took morning walks in Central Park, often asking if I wanted to join. At first I declined, unsure of my place. But one morning he returned with a cup of coffee just the way I liked it, 2 creams, no sugar, and asked again. This time I said yes. We walked quietly side by side. 2 people who had survived the storm in very different ways. I didn't speak much, and neither did he. But there was comfort in the quiet. The kind you find only after heartbreak has passed and healing has begun. People around him began to notice the change. His colleagues commented on how relaxed he seemed. Some of his close friends called, asking questions about the divorce. But Mark didn't share details. He wasn't interested in gossip. "Let people think what they want," he said to me one evening. Truth doesn't need to shout. In the months that followed, I continued my work, but it didn't feel the same. I was no longer just the housekeeper. Mark began inviting me to dinner at the table instead of preparing it for him. We spoke about books, about life, about what it meant to be alone in a city filled with people. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights blink like fireflies below, he turned to me. "You've been the only real thing in my life for a long time," he said. I didn't know it until everything else was gone. I looked at him, my heart unsure of what to say. I wasn't used to kindness from a man like Mark, not the kind that came without condition or agenda. "I never expected any of this," I whispered. "I only wanted to do what was right." He smiled. "And in doing that, you saved me." The day he asked me to dinner, not as an employee, but as a woman, I hesitated. I still wore the same uniforms, still kept my distance when guests came over. But when we were alone, something had shifted. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't grand or loud. It was gentle, real. Months passed. Our bond grew. When Mark proposed, it wasn't with a diamond ring or a public gesture. It was in the kitchen where I stood washing dishes after breakfast. He came up behind me, drying his hands on a towel, and said, "Linda, I want to spend the rest of my life with someone who tells the truth, who sees the world clearly, and who sees me. Will you marry me?" I turned speechless for a moment. Then I smiled and said the only thing I knew for sure. Yes. We married quietly.
No paparazzi. No reporters.
Just a small ceremony in a garden upstate, surrounded by people who mattered. My son came. Mark's sister flew in. There was laughter. There were tears. But mostly there was peace. People later asked how a housekeeper ended up marrying a millionaire once married to a star. I told them the truth. "I didn't fall for his money," I said. "I fell for the man who listened, who saw my worth when others didn't, who understood that love isn't found in spotlight, but in silence." As for Helen, I don't know where she went. Last I heard, she had moved to Los Angeles, trying to launch a new series with a younger audience. Maybe she'll rise again. Maybe she won't. That's not my story anymore. My story is here, with Mark. In a quiet home that no longer hides secrets. With dinners cooked together, and conversations shared over tea. With honesty, healing, and a kind of love I never thought I'd find. I was once a woman who lived in the background, cleaning up other people's messes. Now I live in the light. And I don't need the spotlight to feel seen. Have you ever imagined yourself in this kind of situation? And I know so many things could be going on in your mind. What did you do about it? Subscribe to this channel, like, and hit on notifications for more interesting stories like this.